guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, and if you're coming back, thank you so much for subscribing. Today we have a fun little video. So one of my first videos was critiquing Gabby Hanna's poetry in her last book, and then recently she had a new book that came out, and I was like, you know what? I can capitalize off this. I'm kidding, I'm not. Obviously, I'm not monetized. I just thought it would be fun to look at her new work and see if it has improved since the last time we took a look at her work. Yeah, so I guess that's it. I do want to put just like the tiniest little disclaimer in here that even if I think Gabby Hanna's poetry is bad, it is subjective, and I'm not trying to come for you if you do like it. All art is subjective, and it's also just not a problem if you like something that's bad. Like, that's not an issue. You can like whatever you want, and if you think it's good, great. If you think it's bad and you still like it, great as well. Yeah, art is meant to be interpreted differently by different people, and this is just my interpretation. I am an English major, hi, so I do have a bit of experience critiquing poetry and just like learning about poetry in class, so that's why I don't think I'm qualified to be like a poetry critic, but I am probably more qualified than a different person would be. So those are my credentials. And I'm not just gonna sit here and cyberbully her. Like, I will try to add in some helpful critiques and criticisms, because, you know, yep, let's get into it. The first poem I have is called Date. I'm really easygoing until I'm done pretending that I'm really easygoing. And here's my criticism, Gabby, or anyone who is watching this with the intention of having help with their own poetry. My criticism is that this is not it kind of sounds like it could be a tweet almost, and I think it would do great on Twitter, but this is a poetry book, and I feel like as a poetry book there needs to be a bit more not necessarily like depth or pretentiousness, but like there needs to be a little bit more that you're saying, because this is something that has been said before. It's not really personal, it's not really original, it's just kind of you saying something that I'm sure is relatable to a lot of people, but it's just not said in an artistic way, and it's not conveying a point that is in any way original. Stalker. I tried to follow my dreams, but they got a restraining order. And again, a great tweet, a wonderful tweet, a fire tweet, as the children would say. But as a poem, it is just a little bit flat. There's not a whole lot of meaning behind this. There's not a whole lot of anything behind it. And that's very frustrating, because that is something that I also said about her past book, Adultolescence, was that there were a lot of poems that just didn't really have anything behind them. Like, they were just very surface level, they were very just like wordplay based, and it's disappointing to see that between those two books she hasn't really evolved, she hasn't really done that much, I don't want to say improvement, she hasn't really done that much exploring of her style, of her thoughts, and yeah, so this is just like, it's just a tweet, it's just not, it just needs a little bit of work before it can be good. Yeah, this one's a little bit longer. It's called Necro. I wish you were dead, not because I hate you, but because I love you so much. It's too hard knowing that you're walking around all breathy and oh my god, breathy and pulsy and not decomposy, and I can't have you. I want your outsides to match my insides. I want them to be all still and rotting and soon to be forgotten. I want to know that the reason you're not calling is your fingers have turned to dust. I fantasize that the reason you don't think about me is the worms have eaten your memory. It's much kinder to say that I can't have you, your heart, because it no longer beats. Let me down gently, just die already. I think there is something in this poem. I do think that there is, if she wrote it a little bit differently and if she explored certain parts of the poem more than what she has explored, it would be good. And that didn't make any sense, so let me explain it in more concrete terms. Let me just, if I were doing like a line by line rewrite or critique, this is what I would do. So, I wish you were dead, good. We don't need the second sentence. And then we can skip all the parts about breathy and pulsy and not decomposy, because that is just, it just doesn't really flow very well, I think. I think it's a little bit stilted and like she's trying to maybe make light of it, make a joke, but it's just not really landing for me, so I would cut that part out. And also cut out actually the rest of the stanza. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to roast her, but just, I think the whole first stanza is a little bit too on the nose, and this is something that I notice with a lot of her poetry, is that she doesn't really let the metaphor be a metaphor. Like, she has to over-explain it in case the audience doesn't get it, and it's like, I promise you we will get it. I promise you, you just have to trust your audience. So like, she's just, in this first stanza, she's just really explaining herself, and I don't think she needs to. I think that if she skips straight to, I want to know that the reason you're not calling is your fingers have turned to dust, I think that's good. I actually do think that's good. Maybe I would probably go a little bit further with that. I kind of like horror, so I would kind of do this as like a body horror poem and be like, he can't talk to me because his throat is full of bugs or something. I don't know. Whatever happens, whenever you die. And then just like really amp up that aspect of the poem, because I think that's really good, and I think it is original enough that it can stand on its own. Like, she doesn't need to explain it. It would be perfectly understandable if she just chose that bottom stanza. And I don't like the last two lines. I'm really all over the place, I'm so sorry. I don't like the last two lines. I think they're also just a little bit on the nose. They're just a little bit much. Decline. I lost my credit card and the customer service woman asked for my credit card number, but I don't know my credit card number because I lost my credit card. Yeah. So this is another one of her poems where it's just like a lot of words. And I see that she likes repetition, which is great. You know, repetition can be great in poems, but I think that when your entire poem just is repetition, it's a little bit difficult to be interesting. Like, repetition is a literary device, right? We all learned about it in like fucking 10th grade English class. Repetition is a literary device and it can be used very well, but in this case, it's not being used at all. It's just, that's the whole thing, is that this is repetitive, and that's just not enough, I think. Like, there needs to be some substance behind this. There just needs to be substance in a poem. It can't just be wordplay, in my personal opinion. Murder. How many times did you think you could kill me and get away with it? And then there is a monkey holding a banana gun at the end. And I am not sure what the purpose of the monkey is. Yeah, good. He looks great. She's actually a pretty good artist. That's so unrelated, but like, her drawings are actually pretty good. I like them. Anyway, it's interesting that this poem has like it uses white space in a very, it looks like a very intentional way. Each line is just a little bit shorter than the first one, and then it is long at the end. And I wonder why that is, because usually when you do that, there is a purpose. I can't roast her like this. It just seems like she did this to make it look cool, and like, that's fine, that's valid, but I'm just wondering why. And then the poem itself. Let's actually talk about the poem itself now. I feel like I've heard this poem before. I don't have like a specific time where I think that I've heard this poem before, but I just feel like this idea has been said before. The like, how many times did you think you could kill me? I just feel like I've heard that before somewhere. I don't know where, but it just seems like maybe it is a bit of a cliche. This one is called Tinted. Some people dance like no one's watching. I cry hysterically in my car like no one can see into the window. And here is another one where I think that it could have been kind of interesting, because it is kind of like, I think that if she did something about like the opposite of rose-colored glasses, you know, seeing the world better versus how the world perceives you, I think that is a good topic for a poem. Because there is a lot to be said about just like perception and being perceived and how that feels and what it does to you. I think that's really interesting, and I do like the idea of a tinted window as a metaphor for being seen, being perceived. But I think that if she just added on to this a little bit and maybe put in a little bit more stuff, I just feel like it's very short. I feel like it's very short, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like there is so much more to be said about this topic that she needs more space to do it, or she needs a better words to do it. I think maybe if she wrote a poem just like about herself crying in the car while people are passing by, and maybe she sees someone who's dancing like no one's watching, I think that could be interesting. And also, I'll talk about this a little bit more later, she's not a bad storyteller. I mean, that's how she made her career on YouTube, was like story time and stuff like that. So she's not a bad storyteller, and I think that if she used that ability in her poetry, it would be a lot better. Like, it would be really good if she told a story in poetry. Does that make sense? Like, she wrote a poem that was herself telling a story. This one, I shouldn't laugh. Gross. Tear-stained cheeks and drear-stained peaks and fear-stained weeks and weir-stained freaks. Oh, I don't like that last line. What the hell does that mean? I didn't really like process that the first time I read it. I don't know what that means, weir-stained. Makes me think of bad things, but it might just be me. I don't really have any criticism for this poem because I just think it should be scrapped, but I was just gonna bring this up because it reminds me of those t-shirts that have like all the characters and then the ampersand at the end, like the Friends shirts that are like Joey and Ross and Chandler and Monica, and like it reminds me of those. I just thought it was funny. But I don't really have any criticism for this poem because I just don't like it. I can't think of a better way to say that. Next poem is called Decaf. I put day-old coffee in a plastic travel cup because I can't ask the world for a latte today. I don't know why I chose this poem. I got all the poems that I wanted, and I don't know why I chose this one. Because I don't understand it. I don't know what it's about. I'm thinking maybe this poem is about self-worth and like feeling like you're not worthy of having a nicer coffee on this day. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not what this poem is about. You know, when I said that the audience would understand your poem, I was really talking about, because I foresee people being like, oh wow, you said that your audience would understand, but now you don't understand a single thing she said. And that's true. But what I meant was that if you use a metaphor, your audience is going to understand it. If your poem is unclear, your audience won't understand it. Ready. I need a pillow to scream in and a drink to drown in, a wall to throw my fists into, because even though you're long gone, I'm just not prepared to miss you. And I actually don't have anything to say about this poem. I was just going to draw your attention to the mouse at the bottom, who says, I wonder what makes God laugh. That kind of caught me off guard the first time I saw that, because I was like, holy shit, that's kind of an existentialist question. That kind of hits a little different. I don't know why that little mouse at the bottom is just saying that for fun at the bottom of a poem that he's not a part of, because I think that that is actually really interesting, and I think that that would be a great topic for a poem. I was so confused by this little rat that I googled this to make sure it wasn't a quote from somebody else, and it is a quote from Gabbie's Twitter. So she tweeted something about wonder what makes God laugh. And that's it. That's a great topic for a poem because it's so existentialist. You can talk about the universe and existence as a whole. Wow, you can't even see my hand because of the light. That's so funny. Anyway, I think that this could be a really interesting topic for a poem, and I'm just so... It feels like I got hit by a train, like reading that at the bottom of this poem, which has absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't know why she just confined that to a little speech box above a rat. Make that into a poem. That's interesting. It's interesting. It's fun. Sword. If you want me, if you miss me, no matter what you've done to my heart, I'll expose my chest to you once again. Burn me once, shame on you. Burn me twice, shame on you. Burn me 3 times, I'll let you scatter my ashes across the wasteland of your selfishness. I've tried to build armor and callousness to shield me from the relentless carelessness of the renters of my heart. I couldn't figure out what a renter is, but I have surrendered to the fact that I always have been and always will be this person. I'll always help people who don't deserve it, care for people who won't return it, and fight for people who forget easily. Okay, I read that wrong, but it's okay. I swim oceans for people who won't cross a teardrop for me, and if I drown, so be it. I do like the first part of this poem. I think that the second part, about after, from I've tried to build armor and callousness down, I don't like that. I think she gets a little bit self-congratulatory at the end, which is gonna put off her audience because she's just like drawing attention to how emotional and how empathetic and great she is, and that doesn't make people think that you're actually an empathetic person. Like, drawing attention to your own empathy doesn't make you seem empathetic. So she's drawing attention to the fact that, like, she's always helping people who wouldn't help her, and it's just a little bit self-congratulatory. It's just a little bit weird to me, and I think that it's misplaced in this poem, first of all, because the first half is actually pretty good. I actually like a lot of the parts of it. If you want me, if you miss me, I don't really like that. But the rest of it, I like the ideas that she brings up in this poem. The burn me 3 times, I'll let you scatter my ashes, and no matter what you've done to my heart, I'll expose my chest to you once again. I think that's really interesting. I think that is a good... See, this is an example of also her over-explaining her metaphor, because burn me 3 times, I'll let you scatter my ashes. Clearly, she's talking about someone who has hurt her before, and she still loves them so much that she'll let them do it again. She doesn't have to explain that at the end, where she is patting herself on the back for being so forgiving. It's frustrating because she has a lot of potential in a lot of these poems, but she doesn't do anything with it. And I think if she had even just like 1 or 2 people edit her truly edit her poems before they were published, like an actual editor, like poetry editor, go through and edit her poems and tell her what she could do to improve, I think she would actually grow a lot and be a much better poet for it. And I really think that maybe she doesn't have an editor, which is unfortunate for everybody. Everybody should edit their work, even like professional poets edit their work. And I just think that she would really benefit from joining a writing group or joining some kind of poetry critique group, because she does have good ideas. She just doesn't know how to say them in a way that is effective and that is artistic or creative. She just doesn't know how to say what she's trying to say. So sometimes we get really close to something that's really good, and then she just kind of drops it, and that's really frustrating. I'm taking this too seriously. I know I am. I know you. Please roast me in the comments. Like, I'm taking this way too seriously, and that's also frustrating because I feel like I'm putting in so much thought to these poems, and I know she wrote this in just like one sitting. It's frustrating. I think that if she spent less time explaining and more time just talking about the thing that she's trying to talk about, she would do well. Hot. Where there's smoke, there's a fire, or possibly a vape pen. Either way, get the hell out of there. And I just don't think that I just think that she should not write so many poems that are just words. Like, this one also sounds just kind of like a tweet, you know? And it's like, you do have genuinely interesting ideas, and you do have genuine creativity. And if you actually used that, if you actually fostered that and worked on it and practiced, and eventually you could improve and you could actually be good. But instead you're gonna sit here and you're gonna write these fucking poems that read as if they're tweets or shit posts on a 12-year-old's Tumblr in 2011. And it's frustrating because Gabbie Hanna comes from a place of so much privilege in the writing community, because there are so many poets, there are thousands of poets in America alone who are trying to get published and they can't because nobody fucking publishes poetry. And poetry is a very competitive field, and so many people who are genuinely good and who have genuine passion and talent for poetry are having difficult times getting book deals. They're lucky to be published in a magazine, much less get their own book deal. And Gabbie Hanna has gotten 2 book deals, and between the 2, she hasn't really seemed to improve that much. It seems like she hasn't really practiced between adolescence and Dandelion. So what we would do in my poetry class that I took like last semester or something was every week we would write a poem in a different form. So one week we would do sonnets, one week it would be villanelles, etc., etc. There's the only 2 I can think of right now. And it was very interesting always to see the different ways that people were creative within that form, because when you have a very specific meter and a specific rhyme scheme, you have to be very creative with how you convey what you're trying to say. You have to really think about word choice, and you have to think about your periods and your comma and your punctuation. You have to think about every tiny little aspect of your poem. And even if you choose to write free verse after you've practiced with a bunch of forms, it's going to help you because you have a better understanding of the English language and how that language works. Understanding linguistics is very important to writing poetry, more so than it is for writing like short stories or novels, because in poetry they're so short, especially Gabbie Hanna's micro poetry, it's so short that every word has to count. It has to have a certain quality to it that is very difficult to achieve. The last thing I want to talk about is Gabbie Hanna at the end of her book has a section where she has a bunch of short stories. They're like 2 to 3 pages each, and they're just about different events that have happened to her within her lifetime. And it's just her talking through these events and narrating these events, and they're good. Like, they're actually good. They're engaging and they're interesting, and they feel really important because they feel so real. They feel very personal, and it really does make you feel for her. It makes you sympathetic towards her, because a lot of them do deal with very serious topics, and that's why I'm not going to read any excerpts from them, because I just don't really feel comfortable sharing that for strangers on the internet. But if you want to read them, like, go for it. They're genuinely good, and I think that's the reason that I brought up storytelling in her poetry, because she's good at storytelling. She's good at keeping you engaged, and she's good at just knowing which parts of the story are interesting so that the story flows well and there's never a lag in the tension. She's good at that. Like, she is good at that. And I wish that she would use that talent in her poetry. Anyway, I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you were a poet or a writer, I hope you learned something from this. I hope it was helpful in some way. And if you're not a poet or a writer, I hope you enjoyed it anyway. So thank you so much for watching. Perhaps give me a like, maybe even a subscribe. They're called subscribes on YouTube. And yeah, yes, I will see you in the next one.